Namaskar. Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Pradeep Gokhale from Central University of Tibetan Studies, Sarnath. The module that we are going to discuss now is entitled The Classification of Debate and Rules of Debate, Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda, Nyaya. The author of this module is Professor Ratna Datta Sharma from Jadavpur University. In this module, we are going to discuss mainly the Nyaya theory of debate as it was originally formulated by Gautama in his Nyaya Sutra, and then it was further developed by commentators like Vatsyayana. Maharshi Gautama tried to construct a theory of argumentation out of the 16 terms he introduced in Nyaya Sutra. 14 terms beginning with Samshaya. The list starts with Pramana, Prameya, then Samshaya, Prayojana, Drishtanta, Siddhanta, Avayava, Tarka, Nirnaya, Vada, Jalpa, Vitanda, Hetvabhasa, Chala, Jati, Nigrahasthana. These are the terms he introduces, which are often called Nyaya Padarthas. Now, out of them, 14 terms beginning from Samshaya are accessories to critical consideration or vichara. Samshaya, doubt, for instance, forms its precondition. Some of the Padarthas constitute the main body of critical consideration. Others, such as Nirnaya, form its final stage in which the critical consideration terminates. Then Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda are the different forms of Katha. So Gautama did not himself use the word Katha. He only introduced the terms Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda. But Vatsyayana uses the word Katha, and he brings all the three types of discussion under one title, namely Katha. And these are three different forms of argumentation or three different forms of discussion, you can say. One can ask, what is the need for this kind of science of argumentation? Now, for Naiyayikas it was important because Nyaya is an orthodox system, and Naiyayikas are interested in inference, they are interested in debate, not just for the sake of debate or inference for the sake of inference, but through that they want to establish the content of the Vedas, Vedartha. Similarly, the ultimate goal of all this is supposed to be liberation or moksha. Now, one who makes an attempt to convince others of these truths has definitely tried to convince himself of the same. So first he has to convince oneself, and then he has to convince others. And now in the concrete case, the two contending positions, so while trying to convince other, one enters into a kind of discussion, and that discussion can take a form of debate. Now, in the concrete case, the two contending positions may be represented by two distinct individuals, but this may not always be the case. Sometimes there is no real opposition to be rationally persuaded or refuted. There, one formulates an argument to strengthen one's own conviction about the position by revealing unsoundness of a supposed or a theoretical doubt. Not the doubt which is actually raised by someone else, but a possible doubt. But it would be of no avail unless there are certain agreed principles or norms. The rules of argumentation must be in keeping with what both the parties admit. Otherwise, they would be arguing at cross purposes, with victory eluding them both. And therefore, there have to be some commonly acceptable rules of argumentations, commonly acceptable rules of debate, and something like science of argumentation. So, when we discuss three forms of debate, namely Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda, we have to be clear about the concept which is common to all of them, namely Katha. So Nyaya Sutra 111, which exhaustively mentions the Padarthas with which Nyaya Darshana deals with, includes Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda. So Vatsyayana says that these are three forms of Katha. Now these three varieties of Katha differ from each other with regard to their specific objects, determining purpose and the methods as well. Participation in Vada, being conducive to the attainment of truth, is necessary for one who aims for liberation. Debating with the help of Jalpa and Vitanda has been prescribed for the protection and preservation of the truth attained. So, Vada is meant for the knowledge of truth. There in Vada, the question of defeating the other party, winning over the other party, does not arise. Whereas in Jalpa and Vitanda, these two types of debate, the question of defeating arises. And Jalpa and Vitanda are supposed to be prescribed for defending the truth that one has attained. Now, Vatsyayana, then later commentators, they discuss in detail various rules regarding Katha in general and Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda in particular. For example, who are the appropriate participants in Katha? Then certain conditions are stated. For example, the participants of any Katha, that is whether it is Vada, Jalpa or Vitanda, they must not go against universal experience and must have unimpaired power of perception, that is Shravanadi Patavaha, that is the expression used. Then they should not be quarrelsome and must have the capacity to expose the weakness of the opponent's viewpoint. Thirdly, they should be cautious and conscious of the defects of both the sides. Fourthly, the participants in argumentation must be equal with respect to learning. I mean, these are some of the requirements regarding the participants in Katha. In addition, sometimes when the discussion goes on, someone is appointed who records the whole thing, and he is called Lekhaka, writer. So a writer is to be arranged with the approval of the disputant and the respondent if the debate is to be recorded. Now, in addition to the actual two parties, that is, one party is called Vadi and the other is called Prativadi. In addition to that, there are some members of the council and also who is called Madhyastha, that is the judge. Now, with regard to the members of the council, what are the requirements? Those members of the council should be acceptable to both the contending parties. Secondly, they should be free from undue attachment and aversion. Thirdly, they should be capable of receiving, retaining and demonstrating the meaning which the other speech conveys. They should be brilliant, forgiving and strictly impartial. And lastly, they should be uneven in number so that proper judgment becomes possible. That is, and in addition, they should not be less than 3. So they could be 3 or 5 or 7, like that. Now, what are the duties of these members of the council? They regulate the debate and point out the excellence or defect of the participants. They inspire those who are broken-hearted and to repeat a speech. They also repeat a speech to one in case he fails to receive the purport of the same. Now, the most important person who ultimately gives the decision is umpire or madhyastha. Now, madhyastha is not required in the katha called Vada, because as we saw, Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda, Vada is conducted only for the sake of knowledge of truth. There the question of defeat and victory does not arise, and therefore Madhyastha may not be required there. But Madhyastha has an important role to play, particularly in Jalpa and Vitanda, the other two kinds of debate. Now, what are the functions of Madhyastha? He is to state the point of disputation first, which initiates the process of argumentation. So, what is the issue? He has to state it. Then he decides the procedure to be followed in disputation. What Vadi has to do, what Prativadi has to do, he decides that. Then he is to decide how far the process of argumentation is to be continued, because it can continue, it can be endless also, but there has to be some regulation has to be done so that it can come to a decisive stage. And lastly, his duty is to summarize the arguments of both the contending parties. And not lastly, in addition, there are a few. He should have clear insight into the respective philosophical positions of the parties involved in argumentation, but he should maintain a neutral position. He should not be partial to any one of the parties. He should be capable enough to assess the merits and demerits of the contending parties. Then the umpire should point out if the agreed procedure of argumentation gets violated, and ultimately he has to declare the result of disputation. So these are the duties of the umpire. Now we come to the actual types of katha. The first type of katha is Vada. So what are the salient features of Vada? Two persons are present in the context of Vada holding two incompatible positions as their own. So even in Vada, it is not just chit chat, but there are two parties. They have two different positions which are opposite of each other, and through discussion both the parties are trying to reach the truth. The intention is not to defeat the other party, but intention is to reach the truth. But they have to have two different positions. Then each of them intends to prove that the position which he holds yields the truth. Both the contestants have to make an attempt to refute the alternative position, that is also there. They have to answer the objections brought against them in addition. Now, in the definition of Vada, it is said that Vada is Panchavayava Upapanna. That means it employs the individual 5 sentences. That is Panchavayava, we have already discussed it in one of the modules of the Logic 1 paper actually, where we talked about the steps in the argument. So Nayayikas say that there have to be 5 steps in the argument, and so Gautama says that in Vada also every party has to present its own position in the form of 5-limbed argument, that is Panchavayava Vakya, namely Pratidnya, Hetu, Drishtanta, Upanaya and Nigamana. Then Vada must be Siddhanta Aviruddha. This means that a participant, any participant in Vada, he takes a particular position, he should be consistent with his own tenet, with his position. He need not be consistent with the opponent's position, but he should be consistent with his own position. So he should not deviate from a tenet already admitted in the system which he is arguing for. Now there is, as I said, Gautama says that Vada should be Panchavayava Upapanna, but then there could be a problem. Why? Because in later development we have seen that at the time of Gautama this problem was not there probably, because this Panchavayava model was generally accepted, but In later development, there was dispute about that, and we have seen that Mimamsakas and Vedantins, they would say that only 3 avayavas are necessary and sufficient. Now the question is, suppose there is a debate or there is a vada, no, we are not talking about Jalpa or Vitanda, but vada going on between a Mimamsaka and a Naiyayika. So Mimamsaka will naturally present his argument in Panchavayava form, in the form of 5-member syllogism. But Mimamsaka, when he wants to present his own position, he will not adopt 5-membered argument, but he will adopt only 3-membered argument. Now, can we say that this violates the rule of Vada? So naturally we will have to make an exception here, that every party has to present argument according to the rules of argument which are accepted in his own system. That is, Mimamsaka should be allowed to present his argument in the form of 3-member syllogism, whereas Naiyayika may present his argument in the form of 5-member syllogism. That should not come in the way of ultimately deciding the truth. Now, what is the process followed in Vada? So, Vada should follow a particular order or a particular sequence of activity. The disputant, for example, he may be a Naiyayika, is to offer evidence in favor of his intended thesis. So first he has to, of course, to state his thesis, what he wants to prove. Then he has to offer the evidence. So this will require, of course, the application of the 5-member syllogism, 5-limbed Nyaya Vakya. Then the disputant has to state that the argument, the ground adduced is free from the possible defects. Now this is known as extrication of thorn, that is Kantakodhar. So here what is one supposed to do after giving an argument? Then he may say that in this argument such and such fallacy is not there. It does not suffer from, say, Sadhya Samahetvabhas, or it does not suffer, the argument does not suffer from Prakarana Samahetvabhas, and so on and so forth. So in this way, all the possible defects which could be attributed by the opponent, he has to consider them one after the other and remove them. The extrication of thorn may involve either of the two procedures. One is brief and the other is detailed. So either he may do it in a brief way or detailed way. Then now the opponent comes forward. The opponent would point out the fault in the logical ground offered by the disputant. After criticizing the position of the disputant, the opponent makes an attempt to establish his counter thesis. So opponent first criticizes the disputant's position, but he is not saying that just you are incorrect, I don't have any position. In Vada situation, he is not supposed to do that. This is possible in Vitanda type of debate, where one of the parties has position, the other party does not have any positive position of its own. But in Vada and Jalpa, there are two parties which have their own position. And therefore, here the opponent not only criticizes the position of the disputant, but also presents his own position. Then the proponent, that is the disputant or Vadi, is to answer the charge brought by the opponent. So opponent has raised some objections. Now disputant has to answer those objections. If he fails to do so, the opponent himself can provide an answer to the objection that he has brought against the proponent. So in Vada this is possible, because it is a kind of friendly debate. It is not a hostile debate, and therefore opponent may raise the objections, and suppose the disputant fails to answer those objections, opponent can say that, I have raised the objections, but perhaps these objections can be answered in this way. If he knows the actual answer. Then the disputant is to find fault with the logical ground proposed by the opponent, because opponent also has presented his own position, so disputant has to criticize opponent's position. Then the opponent is to endeavor to answer the objections brought by the disputant against his position. Then he is to reinforce the objections which he brought against the disputant. So in this way it goes on, and this process will go on until one of the positions is established through the refutation of all the objections brought by the opponent or disputant. Any one of the positions will be ultimately established as truth. So this is how Vada has to go on. Then we come to the other type of debate, namely Jalpa, which is translated as disputation. In Jalpa, those whose primary concern is to prove their superiority in the skill of argumentation over the opponent, they are supposed to be the participants of Jalpa. So in Jalpa there are two contending parties attributing incompatible features to a common object. So there is some common object. The two positions, although they are opposite positions, they are about the same issue, about the same theme. So there has to be some common theme, common object. For example, one cannot talk about, one may say God exists, and the other says that Abhava exists. They cannot be, they cannot form part of a single Jalpa. So if the debate is about Abhava, one party says Abhava exists, the other party says Abhava does not exist. So there has to be some common object about which there is debate, and each of the participants not only intends to prove his skill in polemic. So every party tries to prove its own position, and in that it has to prove the skill in polemic, but also he has to have the skill to expose the weakness of the opponent in this respect. Now the participants with this end in view are to perform threefold functions. One function is Swapaksha Sadhana, that is offering evidence in favor of one's own position. Second is Parapaksha Dushana, finding fault with the position of the opponent. And the third is Swapaksha Dushanodhara, that is answering to the objections brought by the opponent. Now what is the definition of Jalpa given by Gautama? Jalpa is characterized by those defining features of Vada mentioned in the previous sutra which are suitable to it. So we have already talked about the features of Vada, and in the definition of Jalpa, Gautama says that Jalpa also has the features of Vada wherever applicable, wherever possible, and where Chala, Jati and all the Nigraha sthanas are employed for the purpose of substantiation and refutation. So Jalpa is Chala, Jati, Nigraha sthana, Sadhana, Upalambha. That is, it contains sadhana and upalambha, that is proving and refuting with the help of Chala, Jati and Nigrahasthana. We will discuss what is Chala, what is Jati, what is Nigrahasthana. So the first feature is Yathokta Upapanna, that is, it indicates that Jalpa resembles Vada, that is endowed with those qualifications mentioned in the definition of Vada, as is found to be applicable. Now where Jalpa differs from Vada, most of the features of Vada will be there in Jalpa also. In all there are 22 defeat situations, 22 Nigrahasthanas. Out of them, all of them cannot be applicable to Vada, but all the defeat situations are applicable to Jalpa. This is one difference. Second difference is Chala and Jati are to be avoided in Vada, but they find scope in Jalpa. Now what is the procedure followed in Jalpa? As we saw, Madhyastha, the umpire, has an important role in Jalpa. So first the Madhyastha formulates the issue of disputation. It initiates the contending parties to enter into the process of argumentation. Now suppose there are two debaters, one is called disputant is suppose called A, and the opponent is called B. So disputant A, for instance, offers the logical ground in favor of his position first. He then has to prove the logical ground he has offered to be faultless. This is known as extrication of thorn, that we have already considered, kantakodhara. Having extricated the thorn, the disputant A will stop. So first A presents his argument, removes all the possible defects, and he stops there. Then B, his opponent, will expose the fault, if there be any, with the logical ground provided by A. Then B will seek to establish his counter thesis. B will stop after having established his own position by extricating the thorn. So same thing B also has to do. He has to point out the defects in A's position, then he has to present his own position, then he has to provide the argument for that, then he has to remove all the possible defects in that. I mean, removing defect here means removing the possible charge of the defects. Then there will be an endeavor on the part of A to meet the charges brought by the opponent against him. Having defended his own position, he will start criticizing the position adopted by B. So in this way, one has to first defend one's own position and then present and then offend the other party. So offense without self-defense will enhance the possibility of one's own defeat. Now what are the roles of disputant and opponent in Jalpa? Thus the order which B, that is opponent, follows in performing the threefold functions is different from that which A, that is disputant, adopts. The order followed by B and A can be stated side by side to make the difference obvious. What is A supposed to do? A has to adduce evidence to establish his position. Then A is to answer the objections brought by B. And lastly, A is to criticize the position of B against him. What B has to do? B has to start with criticism of the position of A. Then B has to establish his own position, and lastly B has to answer the objection brought by A. So while talking about Jalpa, we saw that in the definition of Jalpa, Gautama says that the use of Chala, Jati, Nigrahasthana is important there. It is permitted there and it is important there. So now what is Chala? Chala consists in repudiating the statement of the disputant by willfully twisting its meaning. So in Chala, what is done is the meaning is twisted and argument is based on twist in meaning. Gautama tried to explain the nature of three different types of Chala with suitable examples. And they are called Vak Chala, Samanya Chala and Upachara Chala. So first is Vak Chala, which means verbal casuistry. Now this variety of casuistry rests on equivocation. The example is, somebody says, Navakambalavan ayam manavakaha. This is the statement. Now here Navakambalavan ayam, this manavaka, this boy, possesses Navakambalas. Now the word Navakambala has two meanings, because the word Nava either means new or it means 9. So Navakambalavan means this manavaka possesses a new blanket. This is one meaning, and the other meaning is the manavaka possesses 9 blankets. So suppose somebody makes a statement, Navakambalavan ayam, meaning thereby that this Manavaka is possessing a new blanket. The other one deliberately takes it in another sense and then asks, where are the 9 blankets of this Manavaka? So instead of taking Nava in the sense of new, he takes the word Nava in the sense of 9, and in this way tries to confuse the other debater. So this is a case of Vakchala, verbal casuistry. The other type of casuistry or chala is Samanya chala, that is casuistry by generalization. This kind of casuistry consists in taking a speaker's words more generally than the speaker intends them. Suppose somebody says, learning and character are quite natural to a Brahmin. These are the examples of course, examples which are found in Nyaya Sutra, Nyaya Bhashya, particularly Nyaya Bhashya. Quite natural to a Brahmin, this expression is does not say quite natural means how natural. So taking advantage of that, the opponent takes quite natural as meaning a universal rule. That means every Brahmana by his very nature must have learning and character. I mean, he overgeneralizes it and then raises his objection on the basis of that. And third one is Upachara chala, figurative casuistry. This kind of casuistry consists in taking the speaker's words in primary meaning when the speaker is using them in a metaphorical sense. For instance, the statement, the dais is shouting. Now, suppose there are many people on the dais and they are shouting. Somebody may describe the situation as the dais is shouting. So by that he does not mean that the dais itself is shouting. He is using this expression in figurative sense that men on the dais are shouting. But suppose the opponent takes it in literal sense and asks, how can the dais shout? And dais is an insentient thing. How can it shout? So here one is using what is called Upachara chala, figurative casuistry. So these are some of the tricks or techniques which are used by debaters for confusing the other party and by winning over the other party. Now the second such technique is which is of course an extralogical method, is called jati. Jati is translated as a futile rejoinder. Jati consists in finding fault with a participant's hetu. Hetu here means probans used by the participant on the strength of mere similarity or difference apart from invariable concomitance. So when an argument is stated, some hetu is presented, and that hetu is it is claimed to have invariable concomitance with satya. But if the argument, the counter argument is raised or the objection is raised merely on the basis of similarity of that hetu, similarity or dissimilarity of that hetu with some other property, then that kind of argument will be called jati argument, because the word jati actually means samanya, that is similarity, and the jati argument is based on similarity or difference. One of the contestants may say, for example, sound is not eternal as it has an origin just as a pot. Now this is the argument. To find the fault with this position, the opponent might employ jati argument as follows. If sound having an origin is non-eternal like a pot, it should also have color like a pot, and it should be visible like a pot. So in this way he is finding fault with the drishtanta given by the original arguer. So Gautama in Nyaya Sutra gives a classification of jati into 22 types. Since they have the character of pseudo-refutation, we find that later on Dignaga, the Buddhist logician, introduced the notion of Dushanabhasa, which means pseudo-refutation. So along with Sadhanabhasa, pseudo-proof, he introduced the notion of pseudo-refutation, that is Dushanabhasa, and he gave 40 types of jati under this heading, namely Dushanabhasa. Now, the question can be asked whether these techniques like Chala and Jati, they are proper techniques, whether they should be used in the course of debate. And actually you will find that in the history of Indian logic, there are some who, Gautama and following him Nayayikas, take a stand that in Jalpa and Vitanda, it is quite appropriate, it is quite permissible to use Chala and Jati. Whereas Buddhist logicians, particularly Dharmakirti in Vadanyaya, criticizes this Nyaya view, and he says that they should not be permissible, use of Chala and Jati should not be permissible in any kind of debate, and not only in say Vada type of debate, but also in Jalpa, Vitanda, any type of debate they should not be permissible. But Gautama has his own position. Gautama says that use of these things, these techniques are useful to guard the view which is supported by pramana, just as the fencing of thorny boughs serve the purpose of safeguard. So for protecting one's own position, one may use such techniques as a defense mechanism. And then we come to Nigrahasthana. Nigrahasthana means defeat situation. Gautama has discussed the different situations in which the argumentation process is to be treated as defective and hinders the purpose of argumentation, on the basis of which the madhyastha, that is the umpire, can declare that a particular party is defeated. So this, in this sense, it is called the point of defeat. He has analyzed, Gautama has analyzed different situations where the defects occur and cause the humiliation of the concerned discussant, and they are known as Nigrahasthanas. According to him, Nigrahasthana consists in apratipatti and vipratipatti. So this is actually one of the definition, you can say, which Gautama gives of Nigrahasthana. Apratipatti vipratipattisya Nigrahasthanam. Either due to apratipatti. Now, what is apratipatti? Apratipatti is ignorance, that is not knowing, not understanding what the other party is saying. And vipratipatti means wrongly understanding what the other party is saying. So apratipatti means ignorance and vipratipatti means false cognition. So either due to apratipatti or vipratipatti, the arguer fails to discharge the duties allotted to him. He either fails totally or fails to do so in the appropriate time and in the appropriate manner in which he is supposed to do it as an arguer. This being detected leads to the humiliating situation. So Gautama has mentioned 22 defeat situations. They will be discussed in detail in the next module. So here we are just giving the idea of what is Nigrahasthana. Now we come to the last type of debate, namely Vitanda. Now Vitanda and Jalpa, they have almost all features in common except one important feature, that in Vitanda, one party presents his own position and also gives evidence for that, but the job of the other party is not to give a counter position, but only to refute the position given by the first party. So in Vitanda, one of the disputants only refutes the position which is established by the other one. Both the contestants do not adduce logical ground to establish their respective positions. From this, it does not follow that the opponent has no specific position of his own. the fact is that he does not make any attempt to establish his own position. So it is possible that the other party, that is the opponent in Vitanda, may have his or her own position, but he or she is not supposed to present and defend his own position, his or her own position in the course of debate in Vitanda. Now the difference between Jalpa and Vitanda. The conditions which are to be fulfilled to prove one's strength in argumentation in the cases of Jalpa and Vitanda are different. Jalpa, he who can establish his own position and refute the alternative position attains success. But in the context of Vitanda, the proponent can prove his strength if he can defend his position against the attack of the opponent, and the opponent Vaitandika would be successful in proving his skill in case he can successfully refute the alternative position. In short, the strength of the opponent consists in his defense, while that of the opponent consists in his offense. The Viprativatti Vakya, which marks the beginning of the process of Jalpa, could be of the form X is A or X is B, but the form of the Viprativatti Vakya means the main issue around which the whole debate takes place. How is that issue is to be presented? So in Jalpa it is to be presented as X is A or X is B, because there are two parties having their own different positions. But the form of the Viprativatti Vakya, which marks the beginning of Vitanda, is necessarily of the form it is so or not so. That is, X is A or X is not A, because the other party is not going to present its own position. Therefore, this X is B has no scope there. So these are the various features of the Nyaya theory of debate. Only one topic we have not discussed in detail, that is Nigrahasthana, which will be discussed in the next module. Now for this module, the students are advised to see the e-content also, and also see the references which are suggested at the end of the e-text. Thank you.